Welcome, everybody. It's time once again for the next chapter with Charlie Hedges as he explores turning the page on his life and yours. Hey, Charlie.
Hey, Paul. You know, true freedom is often discovered in the oddest of ways, like using self-discipline and self-responsibility. True freedom truly requires a conscious effort. Our guest today, Davy, has devoted decades of his life to understanding what it means to embrace your highest self and the freedom that comes from learning that truth. Davy is an inspirational author, speaker, retreat host, and breathwork specialist. As the co-founder of Connected Community and the Imiloa Institute, he has worked with clients one-on-one and with groups worldwide for more than 20 years. In the show today, Lee will share with his compassionate voice his fascinating journey to help us understand and embrace our highest self. I can't wait. Lee has brilliant ideas, and I can't wait to hear what he has to say. And so with that, let's bring on our special guest, Davy. Welcome to the next chapter with Charlie.
Thank you so much, Charlie. I'm honored to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you for that beautiful introduction.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's kind of you. You know, as I've been looking at your website and the information you sent and our conversation, I think it's important for you to know that I'm a big believer in the idea of learning how to decipher and make sense of our life journey. And each of us have a life journey, whether we recognize it or not. And you have seemed to embrace a grand journey of your own, one that includes learning from a wide range of life masters such as shamans and scientists and spiritual medicines, and especially breath work. You have done a deep dive into understanding our highest self and how to express that in the world. Can you tell me, since you've done this for a couple of decades or more, what was the driver for you to pursue such an effort toward understanding the meaning of life so intensely?
I just remember really early on having this discomfort, this feelings of anxiety. I dealt with panic attacks for a number of years early in my life. And I just remember feeling alone, like there was no real truth. And I didn't know it at the time, but that was how my journey began, was really seeking to discover what is the truth? Like, who am I really? And that started at 13, 14 years old. It was the first time I remember just beginning to ask questions and being like, what is all this? Who am I? Why do I feel like this? So many years later, I was able to kind of put enough pieces together to realize that that's what I was doing back at that young age, was, just really seeking to discover, what is the truth? Who am I really? And it's what I've discovered is it's so much more than what we're told or taught or able to perceive through our senses.
So I so agree. And you know what I find, and what you just said is an interesting correlation that I find a lot of artists and deep thinkers and people that are dealing with the subject that you and I are keen on, of the meaning of life and our role in that, in cooperation with divinity. I notice a lot of people, or many people in this search, have been haunted by anxiety and what was the word you used? Anxiety and I don't know, we'll just go with anxiety. Do you see a correlation between those who sort of struggle with anxiety and meaning of life? Is that just happenstance, or is it more than coincidental?
It's a great question, and one I don't believe I've been asked before.
Well, I've never thought of it before.
Well, that's just so beautiful. I believe, or at least what's coming through to me in this moment, is that yes, there's a correlation, and it's because I think it kind of goes back to the journey, right? The self journey, and not truly knowing thyself. And it's like we've been kind of programmed to fit in these boxes of, society and how we're supposed to show up. And I think so many people maybe go through their entire lives kind of living a life designed for somebody else. And what I mean by that is it's like that subconscious programming at such an early age is, we're tuning into other people's thoughts about themselves, about relationships, about health, about money, and that really becomes most of our operating system, by the time we hit our 30s. And if you're not aware of what's going on, then, you end up in this habitual, kind of going through the motions way about your life. And I think fitting into that box and not really understanding who we truly are at a fundamental level is what brings about that anxiety. Because, essentially, I spoke about really wanting to discover what the truth was. Well, if we're all living somebody else's life by somebody else's kind of programmed thoughts, then we're not being true to ourselves.
And how can that do anything but create anxiety? Because you are uncomfortable. You know that whatever you're doing is not part of your true self, and therefore maybe you don't recognize it's not part of your true self, but you're recognizing there is a lack of truthfulness and a lack of congruence with who we are, and that certainly creates anxiety. That's a great answer. I've not even thought of this question myself until you mentioned it, and part of it is the greater we understand ourselves, the less anxiety we can have if we understand ourselves. And I want to get into the sort of the divinity of the self, or the self that's in concert with the divine. Doesn't mean that we are God, but we are God-like. And in my tradition, created in the image of God, we are very much God-like, and we need to see that that correlation. On your website, which I will list your website on the show notes, and it's lee-davy.com, is that right?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, and you wrote this on your website, and I was struck by this. There were several comments about your philosophy and what you do for clients, and here's one of the lines that struck me, and I think I'm quoting it pretty close to exactly. And you stated, "I am here to guide you on your sacred journey to open your mind, to honor your spirit, and to hone your physical temple, and once again become the embodiment of divinity in form." I want to break down that sentence just a bit, and I would like to talk primarily, because we're going to spend time on opening your mind and honoring your spirit, and I want to talk a bit about, as we had mentioned before, that becoming the enlightened, or becoming the embodiment of the divinity. What is the sacred journey? And in your eyes, what does it mean to become the embodiment of the divine?
Well, the sacred journey to me is, that's truly knowing thyself. One of my favorite quotes says, "Know thyself, and thou shalt know the universe and God." And, again, we're not taught to go within. We're not taught to understand how our mind and body truly works, and so that sacred self journey, in my eyes, is the most noble endeavor we can ever go on, and that's to truly know thyself. And so kind of putting those pieces of that puzzle together through things like meditation and breath work and mindfulness work, and just even understanding the kind of the neurophysiological aspects of what's actually happening in our brains and bodies, from the time we're born right up until the time we die. There's so much coming to light through the quantum sciences and neurosciences and stuff like that about how we actually function. So I think it's such an important component to everyone's journey. I was just going to speak to the embodying divinity and form component is, another way to look at it, just for simplification, is to say, hey, if we can actually become a peak performer in every area of our life through the sacred self journey, because again, I feel like oftentimes society says, okay, like you can be a peak performer at work, but you've got to sacrifice everything else. You've got to come way out of balance and, sacrifice your home time and your family time and probably your health to make money. And that might even be at a job that you're not even in love with. So now you're sacrificing fulfillment. Well, I believe we can take that idea of peak performance and bring it into every area, every aspect of our lives. And this leads to a kind of peak existence. But it begins with the self. It begins with knowing myself and putting the pieces of that puzzle together first. And I really feel like when you're able to go on this journey of the sacred self, putting all of those pieces, optimizing your health, optimizing kind of the mind, body, spirit aspects of the self, and then bring that peak performance into every area of your life, you can create this peak existence. And that really is, the embodiment of divinity and form.
And so many people find a lack of congruence between divinity and humanity. And so the very thought, what we're talking about right now, is I know we're challenging the thoughts of many listeners and maybe even troubling some people when we say, if you know yourself, you don't totally know the divine, but you know much more about the divine. And just, the tradition that gets knocked on having this great separation between the divine and the human happens to be much of the contemporary Christian thought. And my studies are in the late medieval Christian mystics who Julian of Norwich in 1350 to about, or was it 1450? It was 1400s. And she claimed the same thing. When we know ourselves, if we are created, and the biblical position is we're created what's called in the Latin imago Dei, in the image of God, then to understand ourselves is to indeed understand not the totality of God, because God is wholly other, but so many aspects of the nature of the divine. And
absolutely.
And I just think it's so essential, and I love that you are interested in that. And so therefore I have several questions, because you are, one thing that I love about what I've read about you and what we've talked is you have this beautiful combination of theory and practice, that the theory undergirds our practice, but the practice supports our theory. And you have very practical tools and mindsets and activities that we can do that help us become what I've titled the show Embracing Your Higher Self. And you talk a lot about that. And one of the things I want to start with, and then I've got a list of subjects I want to talk about, but you talked about teaching your students, your clients, your groups, whomever follow your teaching. You talk about a simple phrase, how to show up in life. That is so simple, and yet that is so profound. I just love that statement. And how we show up in life demonstrates our core, and it also demonstrates our relationship with the divine, in my mind. So can you talk to me a bit about how to show up in life, what you mean by that?
Absolutely. I love your questions. So profound. For me, there's this, what I like to call it, a noble sense of self-firstness. So it's not selfishness to show up first of and foremost for yourself. It's actually the opposite, and again, I think in society, we've so embedded in our consciousness is this idea of self-sacrifice, and I'm going to take care of everybody else first. And, maybe if there's enough time left in the day, I'll get to me. And of course, there's never enough time left. And this idea of a noble sense of self-firstness is saying, I'm going to fill my cup first. I'm going to show up first of and foremost for myself, so that there's more of me to go around, so that I don't, I'm not getting upset with family members, or, I'm not feeling taken advantage of, or, this sort of thing, that when I choose to do something for somebody else, I'm able to do it fully and completely because I'm whole first, right? And if that means you have to get up at 4 a.m. to do your morning practice, then so be it. And
yeah.
That's actually what time I start my meditations is at 4 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
And I make sure that the first part of my day is tending to me, so that my cup is full, so that everybody else gets to drink from the overflow of my full cup.
I think I told you the story. It was maybe a couple decades ago. I was flying from Canada to Orange County, California. I think I was flying from Calgary, and I was speaking with a person I was doing corporate training with Chevron at the time as an external consultant. I didn't work for Chevron, I worked with Chevron. And the man found out I was an ex-minister and I was teaching people the ways of life. And he said, I wish, and we were talking spirituality, and he says, I wish, I really rue the fact that I didn't give my children more of an opportunity to develop a sense of spirituality. And as we had talked prior, there was no sense of spirituality in his life. He did not have, he hadn't experienced that. And I told him, bro, it's okay, this is not the way you're hardwired. And it's important for you to know you cannot give what you do not have. And you're saying, let's complete that cup. Let's have so we can give it away. And then I'll close with your baffling and wonderful statement. You only get to keep what you give away. So can you combine all of that and reflect on that a bit? Because I think they're very profound.
Yeah, it's again, it kind of goes back to the empty cup analogy. How do you give from an empty cup? How do you pour from an empty cup? It's impossible. So, and then if you think of the overflowing, or just abundance, another quote I love is, from abundance came abundance, and still abundance remains. And it's that same idea of, when we give more, and this takes a cultivation of the inner world to be able to do that, to be able to give more love, and then you're going to see more love as a reflection in your environment.
Yes.
When abundance comes upon you, or you have wealth or money, the more that you give, the more that you're able to receive. And it's not a giving away with the expectation of receiving. It's actually quite the opposite of saying, okay, now that I'm taken care of, I'm gonna give to everybody else, and then and it's a result of the inner work that one has done, and then the world becomes a reflection of that inner work.
Oh, that's beautifully said. You know what I'm finding in our conversation is that you come from, it appears to me, sort of a universal perspective, and I come from very universal perspective, but I have a dominating ruling point in that I do believe in divinity. I don't think it's limited to any one faith tradition. I think there, all faith traditions that I know, especially the monotheistic and the Hindu that is not monotheistic, are all about a high regard for divinity. And so much of what you're saying is in the scriptures, in the biblical scriptures, but they're just not taught, Lee. We are just not taught. We're taught this performance without substance, performance without having embrace the fullness of the beauty and the wonder of the divine in us, rather than it's become very transactional rather than transformational. And if you make this what we are talking about today, if you make this transactional, you make it a checklist, and if I follow my checklist, then I'm going to be filled and my life is going to be meaningful. That's not going to work. There's a whole different paradigm at work, is there not?
Absolutely. And the emotionality is a big part of that equation, and again, from a very young age, most of us are taught that it's not safe to feel. We're embarrassing, mommy or daddy, or big girls, big boys don't cry, so we stifle our emotions and most often become numb to them. Whereas, the emotionality that's what brings about manifestation. That's what brings about connection, deep connection. And I love the period of time that we're in, because I love science, and spirituality. And I feel like now, science can demonstrate and kind of tell the story that spiritualists, religions, maybe without the dogma, like if you break through the dogma, have been saying forever, and it's, I think that bridge and the meeting of, or the intersection of science and spirituality it's such a beautiful period, because, we really can explain a lot of things that were in the past inexplicable.
Oh, I think there is an intersection, if not an integration. Well, there should be an integration, but
yes,
we're seeing this intersection between science and spirituality, and we're just beginning to see the insights of it. In another 20 to 50 to 100 years, they could almost be identical, because science merely explains the divine logic. There is a divine, because I do believe in an intelligent design, in a creator, and it's the divine brain work of this mechanisms of the divine that can be explained scientifically, but until recently, until quantum physics and a number of other scientific disciplines, that we've been able to see this. So I so agree with you. You know where I want to go now? Now I want to go. You make a very powerful statement, and you're talking about true freedom. And freedom it seems to be very important for you, true freedom. So I would like, and this is a two-part question. The first part is, what do you mean by true freedom? Because it seems to be central to your theses. Mm-hmm. But also the radical responsibility of developing true freedom and the radical self-responsibility. And I would like to talk about true freedom, and I'd like to spend some time on this. True freedom and radical self-responsibility. I'm a big believer in self-responsibility. I believe one of my largest or most impactful words in my philosophy is choice. We have a choice, and responsibility, choice is a responsibility. And I would love to know, first of all, what do you mean by true freedom? And then how does my or our radical self-responsibility contribute to my gaining access to true freedom?
So powerful questions.
Well, I'm just copying what you wrote.
So I just said that, this as I guess the rest of all of where this came from was from my own journey. And about 2 years ago, when the world was upside down and everything kind of stopped, I found myself in Mexico, choosing, you mentioned choice, choosing not to come back to Canada, where I was born and raised. And it's because I, of my own personal beliefs, and I wouldn't succumb to, mandates, and I wouldn't do things the fake way, which was very accessible because I was in Mexico and because I didn't feel like things would change. And so I started asking myself if I was truly free, and getting really honest with myself, decided the answer was no. And it's because, if, again, these are my beliefs. You can take what works for you, and
sure,
and throw the rest away. But if I'm not able to go anywhere and do anything I choose, so long as I intend to and bring no harm towards another being, then I'm not truly free. So some months ago, I ended up channeling what I call the Freedom Manifesto, and it's this idea of being able to show up raw, whole, authentic, without masks or hesitation, without expecting anything from others or being expected of anything in return, or even fitting into societal roles or different things like that. And then that moves into freedom to travel and gather and speech and all of these things that have slowly but surely been taken away under the disguise of it's for our own good. And so freedom is being able to do anything, go anywhere, show up without pretending or without wondering if I say this, are they going to think that, or just showing up raw, whole, and authentic.
Yeah, I love that. Not worried, not so much concerned about how you're going to be judged, what other people will think. This is something that is for your betterment in the process of serving other people, that you are serving yourself first. It's kind of the cup again, where you take that and now you can serve other people, but you can't do that unless you feel free to be your authentic, true self.
Absolutely. So this again is almost, creating and I actually did this. I created a self-reflection checklist, so to actually be able to take full responsibility for all of my own thoughts, feelings, and actions, and really get in alignment with and be able to operate from the higher laws, the law of love and what is true. And then we've got the universal laws, and then we've got the laws of the soul. And if I can get in alignment with all of those, it's kind of like cleaning myself out energetically, then I can actually express my own law in this reality in society. And it's the same as setting up no trespassing signs and saying, you know what, these are my boundaries, these are my no trespassing sign, this is my property, whether it's my body or my land or something I own or something I've created. And your actions right now are causing me harm, and if they continue, I'm going to have to consider it a wrong, and if it continues still, I will consider it a trespass, in which case you'll be liable, and you'll have to pay this much or whatever it is, but not because I'm out to get somebody, because I want to humbly and honorably hold my fellow brothers and sisters accountable for their actions when sometimes they're not aware of that their actions are causing me harm, but to do so in a really loving way, and it's kind of like reflecting back, like I want somebody to reflect my shadows or reflect back to me when I'm not aware that, my actions or my words are doing harm.
Mm-hmm.
And then to be able to forgive those trespasses as I would want my trespasses forgiven me.
Can you give us some examples of what that checklist might look like? So, what are, because I'm curious, what are some of the criteria that fall under a checklist of self-responsibility?
Things like, so something happens in your life, and typically there are other people involved. So, instead of blowing up or getting into a fight or, escalating the thing, it's like, I take time and I ask myself, was that my stuff or was that their stuff? Was I feeling triggered in this situation? Why did I feel triggered? Like, and you can just continue to go deeper into that of just a true self-reflection, so that you're able to come back to the situation when when things have, the energy dissipated a little bit and things have calmed down, and you're able to have a responsible discussion and say, actually, you know what, you said this and it made me feel like this, but I realized that it wasn't you in this situation. That reminded me of something that happened 10 years ago and I was still holding on to it. I apologize for the way I reacted, and so we can actually own our stuff rather than, kind of going back and forth and escalating something that where nobody takes ownership, and then you don't end up talking to the person for 10 years or something.
I love it. It's just, it reminds me, and I don't want to change the names that you use, but it doesn't feel so much as a checklist as it does feel as a personal assessment of how am I accepting and reacting to life, and how is that serving me and how is that serving others, and how do I make changes in that process? Did I catch that's what you're all about?
Yeah, exactly. And then this comes back to just knowing the self, because how do you and really being present, in the moment, because if you're not present and you don't know yourself, then how are you going to own your own stuff? It's going to be the blame game.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things you push that I read, and I don't know if I read or I took it in our notes, but that it's important to continue to push yourself beyond your perceived boundaries and limitations. And those are usually, are they not sort of something that our boundaries and limitations are words from other people, cautions from other people, or you can't do this, you shouldn't do this. And so we create these boundaries that are false boundaries. I like that. I like the idea, the adjective perceived boundaries and limitations that come to you from life and from friends and from parents and teachers and who knows what all. But to push yourself beyond those boundaries and to say, are there soft edges outside these boundaries and limitations that I can move, or maybe even, soft, permeable, that I can expand myself beyond that and be able to think in a whole different mindset.
Absolutely. It's like the 4-minute mile, right? Or anything else that was previously thought to be impossible, and then somebody did it, then all of a sudden, it was no longer possible, because person after person after person realized that if one person could accomplish it, then anybody could, and so it's kind of the same idea that if I look at life as a, instead of, I'm getting older, I can't do what I used to. It's like, no, who says that? Like, who, just because someone or society has said that as we age, things have to fall apart and our minds have to disappear, and, we can't do what we once did. I'm not a believer in that at all. I believe that, that rules are made to be broken, and boundaries are made to be expanded, and if I can do it, anybody can do it.
Yeah. I believe strongly. I believe strongly there is a container, that we need a container, and the container holds some fundamental rules, and sometimes they're very strict and restrictive, and sometimes they're open. But at all times, rules are very helpful until they're not, and then they need to be broken. And if you feel you can't break a rule, then you have limited yourself, and you have a boundary and a limitation that you will not go beyond. However, if you understand, there comes a point where rules no longer serve.
Absolutely. And as you were speaking, I felt to bring this back to to prayer and meditation, because there's this, call it God, call it source, and I pray regularly.
Sure.
there's this, and again, kind of weaving in the science of it, there's this unified field that really does connect us all, and at a quantum level, it's like there is no separation. It doesn't matter what you look at under a microscope. In between the particles, there's empty space, and we can tap into this infinite field of energy, of information, with prayer, with meditation, with breathwork, and we can really. That's when this reality, when rules kind of become super pliable, and you can have a direct impact on your physical reality with prayer, with connecting to this unified field. And so if this reality is that malleable, then why should I be bound by the rules of this reality that say my body's got to break down, or my mind's got to break down, or this sort of thing? It's like, if I can play the quantum game, or the prayer game with God, with Source, from an energetic, from a thought perspective, why can't I play that game with my physicality and from a physical perspective?
I'm curious, there's an assumption that we've assumed the whole show so far that I think requires that we address a little bit for our audience. And we're talking about connecting with our authentic divine self, whatever that self may be. What sort of processes do you take your clients through to help, not just, we've talked about how do you stay in line with those theses. How do you discover what is my authentic self? What is my divine self? How do I even know what the hell that means?
I love that. I've created what I call the freedom method, and it really is. It's, you can look at the beginning as, the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. A fixed mindset kind of says, things are the way they are. I am the way that I am. There's no real room for improvement. I just have to, deal with the cards that I've been dealt, and good enough is good enough, and that's all there is. Whereas a growth mindset says, no, I can learn, I can expand, I can grow, I can push beyond my perceived boundaries and limitations. And so step one of the freedom method is opening to this idea of possibility, of perspectives. The idea that I can at any time choose to create a new identity for myself, a new personality, to create a new personal reality. And then when I do that, when I open up to that, the next step comes, and that's to be able to activate and optimize the mind, body, spirit aspects of the self. And this is with disciplined practice of some of the tools we mentioned, right? Like eating healthy, using detoxification, supplementation, nootropics, breathwork, prayer, meditation, and really, really learning to tune into the feelings within your system, because the feeling is, that's the gauge, that's the barometer with which we can penetrate the field to make manifest everything that's in our heart. And then as we do that, as we begin to activate and optimize those aspects of the self with this disciplined practice, this is when the embodiment starts to take form, and we're really aligning and operating the cognitive, emotional, and physical self, that new identity that we began to look at and open up to in step one. And then this really leads us to this idea of total freedom and fulfillment. And I would say kind of is the gateway to the radical self-responsibility and aligning to and operating from the higher laws.
I love that. It is, perhaps it begins with, maybe it doesn't have to be a strong belief, but it can be just a flickering flame that there is something more, that my life does not have to be static. I do not have to be stuck in this. There is something greater in life than just my day-to-day tactical going to work and making dinner and and watching TV or whatever. There's something greater involved in that. And so it begins with that acceptance that life has much more to offer than just tasks and things that we have to do. And I think you are offering help in deciding that. What I'd like to do is I'd like to close the show, but I want to close the show with something that is very important to you that I barely understand. And you have courses, you have one-on-one classes or one-on-one counseling that you work with people. But breath work, you've talked about breath work as being very important in accessing that authentic inner self. Can you talk to us a bit about breath work and what that means to you and what you offer your clientele on that?
Absolutely, Charlie. It's to me, it's the one medicine, and I do believe it's a medicine that we can't go without. It's we can go without food for days, we can go without water even, but we're not going to get very far for very long without the breath. And most people are not taught how to breathe. And I don't mean just the short, shallow, and I'll even give an example. If I start talking like this with really short, shallow breaths, like you can feel the anxiousness coming from me. And that's the way most people breathe, these short, shallow chest breaths, right? But never are we taught to do deep, full diaphragmatic belly breathing, let alone string a series of cyclical deep, full belly breaths together and then start to play with the holds. And that's all the breath work is that I've been fortunate enough to find and that I offer. I call it 5D breath work. And we're literally just playing with the breath. We're playing with the speeds of the breath. We're changing, whether it's, in and out of the nose, or in the nose, out the mouth, or in the mouth, out the mouth. We're playing with the holds. So sometimes we're holding on the exhale. Sometimes we're holding on the inhale, sometimes at the heart, sometimes in the brain, and the cyclical nature, what's happening is we're blowing off carbon dioxide levels. Now, if nothing else happened, just the reduction of the CO2 levels in the body, we're reducing inflammation. We're beginning to create an alkaline, oxygen-rich environment, and disease cannot live in that type of environment. So if we did this for 20 to 30 minutes every single day and nothing else happened, we're gonna begin to feel healthier.
Is that something that needs to be guided, or can an individual do that on their own?
It depends on where you want to go with it and how deeply you want to go. I've had people go to very deep states where they're seeing things, and they're even.
You said like psychedelic experiences almost.
Yes, psychedelic experiences, out-of-body experiences are very, very likely. And that's, to be honest, that's where I like to take people, because, yes, you're getting all of the neurophysiological benefits. You're creating mitogenesis, the mitochondria, the energy production component of the cells increases if this is a regular practice. The microtubules, they're releasing energy, stored energy. So, it's a form of release. So the microtubules begin to vibrate and oscillate faster. So cell communication picks up. The energetic or the electrical components of the cells begin to pick up. The cells themselves, as well as the proteins, begin to recycle and repair. And that's without even activating the pineal gland, So it's, you get this fountain of beautiful healing chemistry that moves into the brain and body, and then you're stimulating and activating the pineal gland, which literally, when it switches on, it acts like a receiver antenna. And again, that's your connection to the divine. So instead of thinking about things, the thinking mind becomes dormant,
right,
and the electricity switches on in the form, and you become this receiver antenna. So you're no longer thinking. You're just becoming essentially a conduit for the divine to move through.
And breathwork is a very integral part in many meditation techniques. Now, they may not go into it as deeply as you do, but breathwork it's not something that Lee Davy made up. This is something that is
definitely not.
It's historical, and it's very much more Eastern than it is Western. But it is nevertheless, very, very important. Now, how do people get in touch with you to talk about doing that work with you?
You can check me out on Instagram at 5D Breathwork, and then we're just in the process. I guess the other space would be my website, lee-davy, davy.com.
Mm-hmm.
But we're in the process of launching Origin Media, as well as an event for September called Unleash Yourself, and there we're going to have 30 speakers talking about redefining peak performance. So we got some really, really exciting things coming up.
Oh, that's wonderful. I've loved our conversation today. I think you bring wonderful insight, and we talked about embracing your higher self. I'm reading a book now that's a book for creatives, and it's largely talking about creative work of painting, of music, and of writing. And the writer Rick Rubin is a brilliant music producer. I mean, he's probably could be the number one music producer in the industry. And he says, whenever you're creating a work of art, always remember you are writing or composing for an audience of one. If this is not speaking, if this is not coming from your deepest self and gratifying your deepest self, there's no way it's going to serve anybody else. And so there's a sense in which I catch that from you, that we are getting in tune with our deepest self so we can serve the deepest self of other people. It is not just strictly for me to gain some sort of advantage over other people. It's for me to gain a service mentality.
Absolutely. And there's another quote that I love, and it says that no one is free until each are free, and all are freeing each other.
Oh, that's beautiful. Who said that? Somebody?
It's a mentor of mine, Jason Estes.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that.
And that's what I believe we're here to do at this time. We're here to free ourselves first so that we can free each other. And it's kind of like unlocking each other and walking each other home.
Well, I think that describes what we've talked about today. You have been a brilliant guest today, Lee. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know it's later at night for you in Toronto. It's Toronto, is that right?
Just outside of Toronto area.
Oh, okay. But thank you for taking the time. I know it's late at night. Thank you for taking the time to chat with us. We are so appreciative, and I can't wait for airing your show and having our listeners gain the wisdom, insight, and compassion for the human condition. You're a delight, Lee. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Charlie. It was my honor, and I'm so grateful for you and the space you provided and everything you're doing in the world. It's truly an honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and I'd also like to thank our listeners for tuning into the next chapter with Charlie. And until next, this is Charlie Hedges signing off. Bye for now.